I never thought my life would turn into one of those betrayal stories you see in movies. But reality? It's much worse. That night, I came home exhausted from work, expecting to find my wife, Emily, curled up on the couch with a glass of wine, waiting for me like always. Instead, I walked into a scene that shattered my world. The first thing I noticed was the music, soft, romantic. The kind we used to dance to in our early days. But tonight it felt off. The second thing? The wine glasses. 2 of them. One was hers. The other? A stranger's. And then I saw her. Emily stood in the dim light of our bedroom doorway, wrapped in nothing but my white dress shirt, and she wasn't alone. A man, half-dressed, leaned against the wall like he belonged there. Like I was the intruder in my own home. My heart didn't just break, it exploded. 1,000 emotions surged through me at once. Shock. Rage. A deep, soul-crushing betrayal. She didn't scream. She didn't panic. She just looked at me, eyes blank, lips parted as if struggling to find the right words. And then she said it. The words that would burn into my brain forever. We need to talk. Not, this isn't what it looks like. Not, I'm sorry. Not even it was a mistake. Just, we need to talk. Like she was about to negotiate her way out of this. Like my 10 years of love, loyalty, and devotion could be reduced to a business transaction. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. She had no idea who she just betrayed. And in that moment, my heartbreak turned into something else. Something cold. Calculated. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just smiled. Because if she thought she could walk over me and get away with it, she was dead wrong. Emily, and I had the kind of love people envied. Or at least, that's what I thought. 10 years of marriage, a beautiful home, weekend getaways, and inside jokes that no one else understood. It all felt like a dream. She was my best friend, my partner, the woman I swore to protect and cherish until my last breath. Mornings were filled with sleepy kisses, and coffee shared in comfortable silence. Nights ended with whispered, I love yous, and tangled limbs beneath soft sheets. We had traditions, ones that felt sacred. Friday night movie marathons. Sunday morning breakfast in bed. Anniversaries spent in the little cabin by the lake, where I first proposed. She used to look at me like I was her whole world. Until she didn't. I should have seen the signs. The late nights at work. The sudden obsession with her phone, always turned screen down, always accompanied by a forced smile when I asked who she was texting. The subtle distance that started to creep into our conversations, like she was somewhere else even when she was right beside me. At first, I told myself I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid, that work really was keeping her late, that she was just stressed, that I wasn't losing her. But then came the lies. One night, she told me she was going to a friend's birthday dinner. Something felt off, so I casually asked which friend. She hesitated, just for a second, but long enough for my stomach to twist into knots. Lisa, she said too quickly, avoiding my eyes. Lisa had moved to another city 6 months ago. That was the moment my world tilted. I nodded, forcing a smile. Sounds fun. Tell her I said hi. She just mumbled something and grabbed her purse. I watched her walk out the door, my gut screaming at me that something was terribly, terribly wrong. I could have confronted her right then and there. But I needed proof. Cold, undeniable proof. So I waited. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. No texts. No calls. Just silence. Then, at 2:14 a.m., my phone buzzed. Emily, staying at Lisa's. Too tired to drive. Love you. The rage that built inside me wasn't loud. It was quiet. Deadly. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the dark, replaying every moment of our marriage, every sign I had ignored. The next morning, she came home smelling like someone else's cologne. She kissed me on the cheek like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just spent the night in another man's bed. And that's when I knew. She wasn't just slipping away. She was already gone. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. The image of Emily walking through our front door, reeking of someone else, still played in my mind like a broken record. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her in his arms, whispering lies, doing the things she used to do only with me. But I wasn't the kind of man to cry myself to sleep. No, I was the kind of man who made things right. By morning, my heartbreak had turned into something far more dangerous. Determination. I needed proof. Cold, undeniable, devastating proof. Not just for me, but for when I ripped her life apart. So I got to work. While Emily showered, humming some love song like she wasn't a lying, cheating piece of trash, I quietly took her phone from a nightstand. A few quick clicks, and I installed a remote tracking app, one that let me see everything. Calls, messages, location history. She wouldn't even know it was there. Step 1, complete. Step 2, cameras. Emily always thought I was bad with technology. A sweet, clueless husband who needed her help setting up Netflix. She had no idea that before I settled into a corporate job, I had spent years learning cybersecurity for fun. While she went out for coffee with the girls that afternoon, aka meeting her lover, I installed 2 hidden cameras in our bedroom and living room. Small, undetectable, and synced directly to my laptop. Step 3, digital excavation. I spent the entire evening hacking into her emails. It was almost disappointing how easy it was. Her password? Our anniversary date. The irony would have been funny if I wasn't so furious. And there it was. Emails. Hundreds of them. To him. I clicked on the latest one, my jaw tightening with every word. I miss you. Last night was incredible. He has no idea. Attached was a picture of her. In my shirt. In our bed. With his hand on her bare thigh. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palm. Step 4. Private investigator. I wanted more than texts and pictures. I wanted undeniable, inescapable, nuclear-level evidence. So I hired a PI. A professional. Someone who knew exactly how to track, record, and expose cheaters like her. I gave him everything, her work schedule, the places she claimed to be, even her favorite lunch spots. If she was meeting him in public, I would know exactly when and where. 2 days later, I had everything I needed. Photos, videos, time-stamped records of every lie she had told me. One picture stood out. Emily sitting in a restaurant laughing, holding his hand across the table, looking at him the way she used to look at me. It was done. She thought she had fooled me. She had no idea her real nightmare was just beginning. I didn't want just revenge. I wanted justice, the kind that would leave Emily with nothing but regret, humiliation, and a long, lonely road ahead. So, I planned the perfect execution. It started with an invitation. I knew Emily and her lover, let's call him Mark, the home-wrecking idiot, were planning a romantic weekend getaway at a luxury hotel. How did I know? Because Mark, being the genius he was, had emailed her the entire itinerary. I sent Emily a text from my work phone, one she didn't know I had. Me, I know everything. Let's talk. Dinner at our place. Just us. One last chance. She took the bait. Emily, baby, I don't know what you mean, but of course. I love you. I almost laughed. The audacity. I spent the next 48 hours setting up the grand finale. Step 1, the guest list. She thought it was just the 2 of us. Wrong. I invited her parents. Mine too. Some of our closest friends. A few of her work colleagues. Even her boss, the one she had lied to about working late so she could spend time with Mark. Step 2, the entertainment. The cameras I had set up in our house. They had captured everything. Every sneaky call, every whispered, I love you to another man, every time she smiled at her phone thinking I was too stupid to notice. I compiled all of it into a neat little video presentation. Step 3, the stage. Dinner night arrived. Emily walked through the door, wearing her best dress, her makeup flawless, her smile fake. She kissed me on the cheek like she wasn't a cheating liar. You look handsome. I smiled back. And you look exactly like a woman about to have the worst night of her life. Her face twitched. What? But before she could react, the doorbell rang. One by one, our guests arrived. Her parents, looking confused. My parents, worried. Our friends, exchanging awkward glances. And then Mark walked in. With his wife. Yes. He was married too. And guess what? She had no idea either. Emily's face went pale. Mark froze in the doorway, looking at me like he had just walked into an ambush. Which, to be fair, he had. His wife turned to him, confused. Honey, what's going on? I clapped my hands together. I'm so glad you asked. With the push of a button, the living room TV flickered to life. And there it was. Emily's voice filled the room. I can't wait to see you again. He has no clue. I love you. A video played, her sitting on our bed, giggling into the phone, with Mark's name on the screen. Then another, Emily kissing Mark in a parking lot. Then another, her moaning his name in a hotel room. The room fell silent. Emily's mother gasped. Emily, what is this? Her father looked like he was about to have a stroke. Mark's wife? She slapped him so hard his head snapped to the side. Tears welled in Emily's eyes. Baby, I can explain. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, you can? Please go ahead. Should I rewind the part where you tell Mark you wish you'd married him instead? Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Mark was already trying to make his escape, but his wife wasn't having it. She grabbed his phone, scrolling through the texts, her face twisting in fury. You disgusting, cheating piece of... Mark bolted for the door. His wife threw his phone at him. Emily turned to me, desperate. I made a mistake. Please, I love you. I smirked. Love me? You loved me so much you spent 2 years screwing another man. Tears spilled down her face. It didn't mean anything. I leaned in, dropping my voice so only she could hear. That's the funny thing, Emily. It didn't mean anything to me either. That's why I already filed for divorce. Her face crumpled. Also, I added, hope you enjoy moving out. I changed the locks this morning. She choked on a sob. Where will I go? I shrugged. Not my problem. As the guests filed out, shaking their heads, disappointed, disgusted, I stood there watching my cheating wife's world fall apart. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Emily stood in the center of the wreckage, mascara running down her cheeks, her perfect world crumbling around her. Her parents refused to look at her. Our friends whispered among themselves, shaking their heads. Mark's wife had stormed out minutes ago, dragging her pathetic husband behind her. And me? I was just enjoying the view. She took a shaky step toward me. Please, we can fix this. I laughed. Actually laughed. Fix this. Emily, if you crashed a car into a brick wall, would you try to glue it back together? Her lips trembled. It was a mistake. I folded my arms. Was it? Because from where I'm standing, it looked like 2 years of planned betrayal. You didn't trip and fall into another man's bed, Emily. You chose this. Over and over again. She sobbed, gripping my shirt like she had a right to touch me. I don't love him. I love you. I gently peeled her hands off me. No, you don't. You love control. You love safety. And you thought I'd always be here, waiting, no matter how much you disrespected me. I leaned in, lowering my voice so only she could hear. But here's the thing, Emily. I was never as weak as you thought. She gasped like I had slapped her. And in a way, I had. She turned to her parents, desperate now. Mom? Dad? Please, say something. Her father glared at her. What do you want us to say? That we're proud. He scoffed, shaking his head. I raised you better than this, Emily. Her mother wiped her eyes, looking utterly broken. You had a good man. And you threw it away for what? Some cheap fling. Emily reached for her mother's hand, but she pulled away. You've embarrassed us. Your husband. Yourself. Emily's shoulders shook as she crumbled onto the couch, completely shattered. For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered the texts. The whispers. The nights I waited up for a woman who had already left me long ago. I grabbed a duffel bag from the corner and tossed it onto the floor beside her. She blinked up at me. What's this? Your clothes. Her breath hitched. Wait. Oh, and this. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wedding ring. It had been crushed with a hammer. I dropped it onto the floor in front of her. Thought you might want a souvenir. She stared at it, wide-eyed, fresh tears spilling down her face. Please don't do this. I smiled. I didn't. You did. And with that, I walked out the door. Emily sobbed my name as I left, but I never looked back. For the first time in years, I was finally free. I stepped out into the cold night air, taking my first deep breath as a free man. The weight that had been crushing me for months, no years, had finally lifted. I didn't need to look back to know that Emily was still inside, sobbing, clutching a life she had already destroyed with her own hands. It wasn't my problem anymore. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed. A text from my lawyer. Divorce papers filed. You should have them by the morning. She won't get a cent more than she deserves. I smirked. Perfect. It would take time, of course. Separating our finances, finalizing the paperwork, making sure she left the house without trying to weasel her way back in. But the hardest part, the confrontation, the exposure, the revenge, that was done. And it had been beautiful. I drove aimlessly for a while, the city lights blurring past me. For the first time in over a decade, I had nowhere to be. No one waiting for me at home. No lies hanging over my head like a storm cloud. Just me, the road, and a future that was suddenly wide open. And surprisingly, I wasn't scared. I pulled into a small diner on the outskirts of town. The kind of place that smelled like burnt coffee and nostalgia. I needed time to think, to breathe. As I sat down, a waitress walked over, smiling. "Rough night." I let out a small chuckle. "You have no idea." She raised an eyebrow. "Want to talk about it?" I shook my head. "Not yet." She nodded, setting down a cup of coffee. "Well, whatever it is, you survived it. That counts for something." I took a sip, letting her words sink in. She was right. For months, I had felt like my world was ending. Like Emily's betrayal had broken me. But sitting there alone, with no obligations, no weight on my chest, I realized something. She didn't break me. She set me free. I thought about my future. What came next? A new home? A new job? A new life? For the first time in years, I didn't feel lost. I felt alive. I glanced back at the waitress. She was busy taking orders, laughing with customers. I wasn't thinking about romance, not yet. But I knew one thing for certain. I would never settle for anything less than real love again. And as I finished my coffee and walked out of that diner, I knew, without a doubt, Emily's betrayal was the best thing that ever happened to me.